Welcome to Windows on the World, Lark in Texas, and we're going to talk about communitarianism, the way it's rolled out, what it is, who enforces it, and how you can recognize it in your own community. Because what communitarianism is all about is the rights of a group over individuals. I'm going to welcome now Lark in Texas. Can you hear us, Lark?
I can indeed. How are you, Mark?
Very well.
In 2004, very shortly, I discovered this word communitarian and of Nikki Rapana at her blog, Living Outside the Dialectic. Do a search. And essentially read everything I could get my hands on about this topic, and of course was quite concerned that nobody seemed to be talking about it. And so I've been solely devoted to researching this topic for the last 15 years, and I've been active on the internet for 10 years. I'm a little troubled by this technology, but I'm cognizant of the fact that, we really have needed it to connect dots, because, most of us realize today that we've been lied to all of our lives, or we were provided the idiot's treatment about things like history and the law, the nature of contracts, and everything else. So anyway, I regard communitarianism as the elephant in the room that nobody sees. And all of us know the fable of the blind men and the elephant, the Hindu sojourners who are blind, who happen upon an elephant. One man touches the side of the elephant and proclaims that he's bumped into a wall. Another man touches upon the elephant's tusk and exclaims, but it's like a spear. Another one has touched upon the elephant's tail and he says, well, no, it's a rope. And another one touches the elephant's trunk and it's a snake. So this is what communitarianism is. It's an 8-syllable word that you're never going to hear on your Sunday talk shows. Your leading lights in the Fourth Estate, big media pathways, they're never going to say this word because, it's a little complicated and it's difficult to spell. It's hard to say. And they like it they like it like that. It's just that simple.
Now, this concept goes back, this concept goes back quite a long way. I was just going to try and prompt you to give us the history of where the word actually came from, because I think that's quite important.
Well, yes, it was coined from the French into the English in 1841 by one John Goodwin Barmby. B-A-R-M as in Mary, B as in boy, Y. And I like to say that it's important to understand the flavor of the times in 1841. 1841 was the year that Clinton Roosevelt published a book called The Science of Government, founded on natural law. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon in France published a pamphlet entitled What is Property? In which he suggested that property ownership was tantamount to theft. Charles Mackay published a book in 1841 called Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. But John Goodwin Barmby was also the Englishman who introduced the French word communisme into English, and that became known as communism. So this man Barmby was a contemporary of both Marx and Engels, and then we all understand and know that in 1848 was the publication of the Communist Manifesto and the breakout of revolutions in Europe. You can look that up, revolutions of 1848. So there is where this word comes from, but of course it goes all the way back into antiquity and the mystery schools, and the concept has been with us really forever. Communitarianism today is a rebranding of the isms known as capitalism and communism.
So, yes, I've come across this really in a big way since 2010. The David Cameron government actually announced that they were going to be using communitarianism And from this, we got a thing over here called the big society. Of course, Obama did the same thing in America with Obama's army, these community organizers. We had community organizers here. Websites started to crop up with titles like community organizers. We had unlimited, locality, intentionality. These are all ways of making it look as though it's going local. So in other words, you are being infiltrated. These communitarian agendas. What do I mean by communitarian agendas? Well, I mean that they were taking over the narrative of public opinion everywhere. And they were broadly mentored into the new rules, which are that climate change, anthropogenic climate change, is a threat because that has to be the enemy. And this is where communitarianism joined in with that. And basically, we have this new system. So in a way, we can look at organizations like Extinction Rebellion. That's basically communitarianism, because what it means is that a huge group of people who act like a hive mind then take the rights of all other individuals. And that's what I saw it happening. People who were coming in, who were very, very well trained, but they had very limited ideology. In other words, they couldn't really argue, so they were intolerant to things outside of their own created so-called paradigm. Is this what you're talking about, Lars?
Absolutely. And of course, it can be rephrased in 100 different other ways, just as well as you just did, as we understand. But it is, I considered it a meme virus, and I consider that we're involved in a mimetic warfare. We're dealing with parasitism, and we're dealing with people who have jumped on the bandwagon of the communitarian gestalt. And the reason is because they want to be successful, and they want to go along with whatever's going to allow them to be successful. And these people are essentially bought and paid for. You know, you and I today, Mark, are behind enemy lines. We're surrounded by zombies and criminals, just like every listener to this podcast today. And we need to come to grips with this. What we're dealing with is unwitting dupes and useful idiots. We're talking about people that have experienced trauma-based mind control in the universities. And it's these so-called professionals, the best and brightest amongst us, the ones who are the most success-driven, who are leading the charge. These people are very often the most brainwashed of all members of our society. And we have to remember the remarks of people like John Maynard Keynes. You can go to a website, do a search, Keynes at Harvard. He said, famously or infamously, however you wish to look at it, he said that the Marxian socialist had it all wrong, yet the Fabian socialist had it all right. What he said was that Marx wanted to go after the proletariat, the man wielding the pitchfork, so that they could storm the Bastille and change the order of the day, etc. However, the Fabian socialists adopted a strategy of gradualism and or incrementalism. They knew that the people that they would target first and foremost were the best and brightest amongst us, the beautiful, the smart, the talented, the success-driven, the careerists, the credentialists, the opportunists, trust fund babies. Anybody that could be looked upon as a thought leader in our world today are the people they targeted. And that's why they've been successful.
This is so true. What I've noticed is that we have all these organizations like Unlimited, Locality, Intentionality, Citizens UK. They all sprang up, and they're all about training future leaders. We have crown agents in hundreds of countries all over the world. I think we're in 100 countries, maybe more. And they train future leaders in other countries. This is a virus that goes everywhere. I've seen it in foreign countries. It's rolled out through NGOs. And all of this came out of a document as well called Our Common Future. They were pushing the communitarian agenda because they knew that with belief in man-made climate change, they had the religion, and all they had to do was use the principles of communitarianism to basically infiltrate every single organization. Is this what you're talking about, Lark?
Well, yes, the people who are most facile in their use of the language, in other words, they've taken to the brainwashing in such a way that they can wield the language to convince and or influence, persuade others to follow along and join that same bandwagon. Those are the people that are elevated into the ranks of our media personalities, our politicos, people in think tanks, et cetera, even university professors, school superintendents, pastors, rabbis, priests, and the like. These are the people that are elevated because they have become the best adapted to the language of communitarian code speak, which is rather much like Orwellian newspeak or doublethink. But yes, these people are essentially budding sociopaths and crooks. That's what they are, every one of them.
Yes. And what we're talking about here is citizens groups being formed in your area. So, in other words, your citizens assembly. This is all about communitarianism. That's exactly what it is. It doesn't mean everyone agrees. It means that everyone appears to agree. And then what do we get? Consensus, the C word. Yes, consensus comes out of this need for change. What's the change? They never tell you what the change is. When you mention think tanks and government organizations there, it really struck home with me because we have a government think tank in the UK called Demos. You have one in the States, and it actually does very similar things. It works along this communitarianism hive mind agenda. But Demos actually stated that the new democracy in the UK would work with a combination of government open infiltration and citizens groups taking direct action. Of course, Extinction Rebellion of the citizens group taking direct action. So what happens is you get the globalists who create their anti-globalist movement, so they control everything. They control the whole narrative. So if you want the public to agree to something, make room for protest. Make it look as though they can protest against what you're going to impose, but they actually protest about what the government actually wants. So in other words, the government wants to carbon tax and control under the UN. The national government is not important anymore. And the reason for that is the national government in the UK has given power to a George Soros funded organization to implement what's called citizens assemblies, which use the communitarian rules of consensus and basically steering people into a predicted outcome by a process called Delphi technique, which is done through facilitators. And this is where the whole communitarian agenda comes together. Are you aware of the Delphi technique?
Yes, I'm also aware that it came from the RAND Corporation, which happened to be incorporated,
right,
or happened to have been incorporated on the very day that the state of Israel declared its independence. It's very similar to a situation known as Facebook today. Facebook was born from a military project called LifeLog. And as soon as the funding was withdrawn for LifeLog, Facebook was incorporated, and so we need to make some connections of the dots in these arenas too. But I've seen it. There's many ways to describe what has happened historically that has brought us to this point in time. But there's no question about it. We're dealing with really. I look at it this way: the communitarians. Remember this, a communitarian can be a communitarian and not even know of the word. Okay? They don't necessarily even know that they're communitarians. They, again, probably have never heard the word.
Yes, that's very true. Very true.
And so the overarching agenda, this overarching communitarian agenda is really twofold. The first is depopulation. And depopulation is really just a standalone word, a euphemism, if you will, for various types of warfare which are being waged against you and me and everybody else. Now, this is total war, but it's a silent war very often. It's not about guns blazing and bombs going off necessarily. What it is psychological, asymmetrical, mimetic, cultural, economic, spiritual, cybernetic. These types of war, lawfare is a type of war that's being waged against us. And the second aspect after depopulation is, and remember, this is their aims, their intention is one of techno-slavery. This is technological slavery. They want, first of all, to control the narrative. They want to control all media pathways. They want to control your mind. And they want to control the thoughts that emanate from your mind because, again, they're waging a mimetic war upon us. And so when we think about technology, we have to consider that language itself is man's oldest technology. Then we have to look at this thing called money, which is another form of technology or a tool, a contrivance of man that is used to control us. And then finally, we have our love affair with machines and technologies and tools, going back to our time in caves, when we were hunter-gatherers. You know, the rock, the stick, the fulcrum, the lever, the anvil, the axe. These are all technologies or tools. Then we have the industrial age, now being supplanted by the so-called information age. And now look at the tools and the machines and the toys that we love so much. And that would be things like smart devices and computers and laptops and smart meters and cell phone towers and 5G and all this madness. The techno crazies have literally taken hold of our culture. So there we have it. The overarching agenda is depopulation, the war on you. And yes, it does include biological warfare, ladies and gentlemen. And yes, what is their aim? Is to make you a damn slave.
And I think people might be getting a little bit of an inkling as to why these citizens' assemblies are being rolled out. Obviously, they want to get the public to accept more and more draconian taxation and lose their rights. How do you do that? You make them feel good about it. You give them a religion. We've got the Gaia religion, the New Age religion. Basically, we've got people who are mentored into the program now. So they're mentored into the program and they believe that they need to depopulate themselves. So this is the end result of communitarianism. We've got Extinction Rebellion, who are a globalist, anti-globalist organization. They're a globalist-funded anti-globalist organization. So, in other words, unpopular policies can be implemented by the people. This is what this communitarian agenda is about. It's not really about the people. It's about a kind of super agency, basically globalism, world government. So I think that's a great introduction, Lark. You've covered a lot of ground there. I'd like to take it down to the local level now of how we see it, because when we go from global to local, that's really what communitarianism is all about. And it was actually Marshall McLuhan who coined the term global village, and the media is the message. So he obviously knew where things were going. And a lot of this is very clever social engineering. It's clever social engineering, but the actual implementation of it is simple. It has to be simple, otherwise it wouldn't work. So we have a template now of all these different organizations. NGOs are basically a shadow government running many countries. I've seen it in other countries, and it's certainly true in the UK. What we have are thousands and thousands of NGOs, and we have people who are mentored into this new program of communitarianism, and it's done through organizations. Yes, I've mentioned some. Locality, intentionality, unlimited. Unlimited have agents in every country in the world, as do Crown agents. These are just two. There are lots and lots of these, and they mentor people into this broad idea, which has a very narrow kind of way of implementing itself, and it will implement itself in your local area. You will get things like sewing groups starting up, community hubs, not community centres, because they've all been closed down. We now have community hubs. A community hub will appear, and the next thing is all your roads will start to close. We had this in Waltham Forest. They tell you what you're going to get, and then they bring in the people to implement it. It's very simple. It's like infiltration. And of course, we have to look at the whole bigger picture. What are Antifa? Antifa are a militant form of communitarianism. You have to have something for everybody. It's the system of moods. This is a thing the Soviets were really clever at. So you give people a bit of what they want. You let people think that they're part of an anarchist group. You let people think that they're protesting against the government. You let people think that they're in a New Age movement. You let people think all of these different moods and get them involved in their own little groups, but their own little groups are part of the whole That's what communitarianism is. It contains everything. It's a container, a hold-all container for all moods and everything that affects the livelihood of people into a new form of totalitarianism. And totalitarianism recognizes no limits to authority and strives to regulate every aspect of public and private life. Now, what the difference is meant to be with communitarianism is it emphasizes the group over the individual, but the group is a hive mind, so there is no individuality. Do you want to pick up on that, Lark?
Well, communitarians also believe that nobody has rights unless they're accompanied by duties and responsibilities. When we talk about balancing and harmonizing of norms, the rights of the individual as opposed to the rights of the community at large, we can liken this as the camel's nose under the tent. And everything is tilted towards the rights of the community and against the rights of the individual. I have likened communitarianism to parasitism, neocolonialism, neo-feudalism, Neoplatonism, but it's also a system of arrested development in which your human potential is deliberately harvested and or thwarted. Your pathways in life are narrowed. Your freedoms of choice and options in life are narrowed. Things like exercise of free will is to be done away with. Personal autonomy. The whole idea of independent thought and action is done away with in favor of dependency, codependency, and interdependency. It's a gigantic scam, and most of the people that are affecting and or implementing the vision, they are at once the, these people are criminals. They are unwitting dupes and useful idiots. They have no idea what it is that they're doing, and they don't really give a damn, most of them, if you told them and you spelled it out in black and white.
It takes us into what I know's happened to small organizations who've been taken over through communitarian law, and that's what I wanted to get onto next. Courts rule against individuals in favor of self-defined community.
We are being managed via communitarian law enforcement today. We have to remember that the National Defense Authorization Act, Department of Homeland Security, the Patriot Act, all these things were already in writing, in the bag, waiting for 9/11 in this country to be rolled out. We have to remember that when the Department of Homeland Security was created, they actually hired as consultants Marcus Wolf of the East German Stasi and Evgeny Primakov from the Soviet KGB as consultants. I went to a little meet and greet a little over a year ago up the street at the coffee shop, and the cops, the police department wanted to reach out to the community and get to know people because they were looking for people to volunteer their efforts to actually police the neighborhood and spy on their neighbors, just like the East German Stasi model. And at this meet and greet, I met several police officers. They were quite friendly, chatty, and it was a relaxing situation because these people were not on duty, and most people there were there to support the men in blue, the boys in blue, etc., etc. Well, they all passed out their business cards. Their badge numbers were on those cards. One man, though, was in civilian clothing, and he clearly looked to be part of the camp that was with the police department, and he too extended me his card. And what did his card say in lieu of a badge number? It said PhD. And when I mentioned communitarian law to him, this man did not bat an eye. Now, that's my most recent experience. Another experience is there is a popular app for people that live in suburban neighborhoods all over the cities, and there's many like it. And this one is called Nextdoor. And this is a way for the neighborhood to get to know each other and to reach out to each other. When somebody has a lost cat or a lost dog, or they want to know the best place to get some service done on the roof of their house or what have you, then people in the neighborhoods use these things. Well, the police department is also a member of this thing called Nextdoor, and they monitor these things through their fusion centers because they want to get a feel for what the people are thinking that live in these neighborhoods. And they're using this data to essentially herd the people into communitarian governance. And this is self-policing of each other. This is only just one or two examples.
That's absolutely right.
And when it comes to the courts, we have to understand that in this country, for example, I have been one of the few people that have pointed out in alternative media pathways over the past 10 years that there was a quite notable law professor at Harvard University for 40 years by the name of Harold Berman. You can look him up. He recently passed away a few years ago, but he was a noted Soviet legal expert. When he finished his time and received his retirement after a long time tenure as a tenured law professor there at Harvard, he spent 20 years more at Emory University in Atlanta. And I did all kinds of research on this man, his writings, his speeches, and everything else. But this is a man who's been teaching American law students for 60 years. What? But communitarian law. Let me see if I can help you and the listeners determine where to find communitarian law and the evidence for it.
That'd be really helpful. That'd be really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, the thing I was trying to remember that I couldn't quite capture is called the Institute of American and Talmudic Law, and that's iatlaw.org. Click on faculty, scroll all the way down the page, you'll see a group photo, and the late Justice Antonin Scalia is right in the center of that group photo. So apparently he was invited to discuss the vagaries of Talmudic law and how it was probably a superior form of law than American law, because American law is thought to be, outdated and old hat. So the other thing you can do is you can go into the law schools, any university that has a law school, and then look at their journals that they keep, that they are proud of and they like to publish. And these are generally dissertation documents. They're articles by law professors, and generally they're for people that are interested in matters concerning the law. And what I stumbled upon is something called the Law Review of Brigham Young University. This is where I got educated, and their journals go all the way back to the 70s. And right about the late 80s and early 90s is when you start seeing the appearance of this word communitarian more and more. And what they're enamored with nowadays is what they call soft law or reflexive law. But do yourselves a favor. The other thing, too, is to just simply go online and do a search for European Union law. This is the law of the European Union. It's also called EU law or community law by your big media pundits and your sock puppets. But this is nothing more than a euphemism for the French acquis communautaire, translated into English, that's communitarian law. This is the law of the European Union, which is more than 70 years in the making. And this is the law which is being superimposed over and upon all nation states, all nationalist laws around the world right now.
A lot of this stuff is difficult for the public to see because it's not openly talked about. It's kind of open infiltration. It's infiltration of every organization. So if you're watching the television, say the BBC, you'll see communitarianism on there all day long, but you don't know what it is. And this is the point, that when I started seeing these change agents, they were so radically different from the people I knew, because the people I know and associate with are all individuals. And what this is about is destroying the rights of the individual for the collective. And whenever you hear collectivism, watch out, because that means that you're going to be steered into something which you may not know about and you may not want. And in the case of what's happening in the UK, the citizens' assemblies are the absolute outcome of communitarianism. They are the controlling of the narrative in the totalitarianism respect, because they're all about controlling the narrative of public opinion and forcing the public into accepting things that they wouldn't normally accept. But that's for the common good. And I talked about this on the Jason Liosato's show last night. The common good means that it appears that society is functioning in the correct way. It doesn't mean that it's good for anybody. It means that it's good because it looks as though society is functioning. And that's the whole thing. Things like social equity, social justice, well, these words are used, they're all communitarianism terms, and I started seeing this in groups that were forming through NGOs and through these communitarianism groups such as Unlimited Locality, Intentionality, Citizens UK. They're mentoring everybody into it from 8 to 80. This is what they say. I've seen it rolled out. It's been rolled out everywhere, all over the country in the UK. Every town, city and village has got this communitarianism agenda. I've been all over the country. I've even been in small country village churches, and it's there. Spy programs are in place. There's change agents everywhere. It's a virus that's taken over everything, and the only way around it is to reclaim sovereignty. Yeah, sorry. Oh, yeah.
In a nutshell, communitarianism is organized crime made legal. That's what it is. It is a system of human, child, sex, drug, and organ trafficking made legal. It is indeed a type of totalitarianism, even despotism.
Yeah.
And the people are being unwittingly led to, as those bison of the North American plains that were driven to the edge of an abyss, to the cliff, to meet their deaths and their eventual harvest by the Indians. It's called a buffalo jump. You get people to herd in a direction, and they have no idea that they are sliding down that communitarian slope because they are ignorant. They're just ignorant. And I'm talking about the people that think they're so damn smart, that are on your telly, you know, that write.
Well, these are the people that they want. These are the people that the Soviets. These are the people the Soviets defined as useful idiots, because they wanted people who were narcissistic. Now, if you look at Extinction Rebellion, it's a narcissistic theatre. It's not a protest. It's street theatre mixed with narcissism. And that's why that needs to be done as far as behind the scenes with people. I would recommend that they don't put it into the public until they're actually going to act, because this communitarian agenda is absolutely infiltrated. It's infiltrated everything, every organization, and it's quite incredible. But since 2010 in this country, it has taken over everything. It was slower before 2010, but from then onwards, with the formation of these NGOs and these charities and organizations, these umbrella groups, Power to Change, who are an umbrella group, a lot of it's national lottery funded, the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, who are involved with Sortition, My Society, and Involve is an organization using Delphi technique, which is implementing citizens' assemblies. It's totalitarian in the respect that the outcome is already predicted. There is no choice. And that's where people can start fighting back and say, no, this is not true. You can only do this, though, if you get organized.
Well, you know, there's a part of me that wants, I mean, this. You mentioned about street theater and the like. Well, you know, I kind of think this is just a gigantic comedy that we're all witnessing some days.
Yes.
I myself have thought that I should declare myself an endangered species, just like the prairie dog, and opt out. But somehow I feel honor bound to somehow help all of these zombies and criminals, these unwitting dupes, see their way out of this miasma that they've somehow caught themselves up in. Another time, I've thought that I should probably be like Thomas Paine and become a pamphleteer and publish something called Common Sense, but I'm going to call it Post-Truth News. And the tagline is, we lie constantly, so you don't have to. and then make sure that all the suits in the downtown Dallas area where I live, all those success-driven people in their power suits, their business suits, their jackets and ties, make sure they get one in their hands, and let these son of a bitches know that we're onto their con. And that includes all these politicos that deign to think that they have the right to think for me or you or anybody else. These people, ladies and gentlemen, are simply not qualified to think for you at all. We'll leave it there.
Ramping up. The whole country's been re-engineered under the UN Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 policies. There's a Wild 11 conference next month in Jaipur, which puts 50% of the world's land and oceans into the stewardship under the UN, which basically means privatization. So what we have is a corporate agenda that's rolled out locally, and this communitarianism is a big part of it. It's the big part of it. It's what I call a hive mind. So thanks to everyone who's been in chat, and that's good night from me and good night from Lark in Texas. And Lark's going to be on the show again very soon. Thanks a lot and good night.